Welcome to Peasant Wives, a short story from Russia's master of irony, Anton Chekhov. Written in 1891, this deceptively simple tale of village life tears the lid off society's double standards. When a married woman strays, who's really to blame? The sinful temptress, or the system that traps her in the first place? Chekhov knows, but he'll let you figure it out for yourself. Stay tuned after the story for my analysis of how this seemingly quiet domestic drama actually packs a fierce punch at the hypocrisies of its day. And maybe ours too. And now, Anton Chekhov's Peasant Wives. In the village of Ray-Bouge, just facing the church, stands a two-storied house with a stone foundation and an iron roof. In the lower story, the owner himself, Philip Ivanov Kashin, nicknamed Diudia, lives with his family. And on the upper floor, where it is apt to be very hot in summer and very cold in winter, they put up government officials, merchants, or landowners who chance to be traveling that way. Diudia rents some bits of land, keeps a tavern on the high road, does a trade in tar, honey, cattle, and jackdaws, and has already something like 8,000 rubles put by in the bank in the town. His elder son, Fyodor, is head engineer in the factory, and, as the peasants say of him, he has risen so high in the world that he is quite out of reach now. Fyodor's wife, Sofia, a plain, ailing woman, lives at home at her father-in-law's. She is forever crying, and every Sunday she goes over to the hospital for medicine. Diudia's second son, the hunchback Alyoshka, is living at home at his father's. He has only lately been married to Varvara, whom they singled out for him from a poor family. She is a handsome young woman, smart and buxom. When officials or merchants put up at the house, they always insist on having Varvara to bring in the samovar and make their beds. One June evening, when the sun was setting and the air was full of the smell of hay, of steaming dung heaps and new milk, a plain-looking cart drove into Diudia's yard with 3 people in it, a man of about 30 in a canvas suit. Beside him, a little boy of 7 or 8, in a long black coat with big bone buttons, and on the driver's seat, a young fellow in a red shirt. The young fellow took out the horses and led them out into the street to walk them up and down a bit, while the traveller washed, said a prayer, turning towards the church, then spread a rug near the cart and sat down with the boy to supper. He ate without haste, sedately, and Diudia, who had seen a good many travellers in his time, knew him from his manners for a business-like man, serious and aware of his own value. Diudia was sitting on the step in his waistcoat, without a cap on, waiting for the visitor to speak first. He was used to hearing all kinds of stories from the travellers in the evening, and he liked listening to them before going to bed. His old wife, Afanasyevna, and his daughter-in-law, Sofia, were milking in the cowshed. The other daughter-in-law, Varvara, was sitting at the open window of the upper story, eating sunflower seeds. "The little chap will be your son, I'm thinking?" Diudia asked the traveller. "No, adopted, an orphan. I took him for my soul's salvation." They got into conversation. The stranger seemed to be a man fond of talking and ready of speech, and Diudia learned from him that he was from the town, was of the tradesman class, and had a house of his own, that his name was Matvey Savitch, that he was on his way now to look at some gardens that he was renting from some German colonists, and that the boy's name was Kuzka. The evening was hot and close. No one felt inclined for sleep. When it was getting dark, and pale stars began to twinkle here and there in the sky, Matvey Savitch began to tell how he had come by Kuzka. Afanasyevna and Sofia stood a little way off, listening. Kuzka had gone to the gate. "It's a complicated story, old man," began Matvey Savitch. 10 years ago, in a little house in our street, next door to me, where now there's a tallow and oil factory, there was living an old widow, Marfa Semyonovna Kapluntsev, and she had 2 sons. One was a guard on the railway, but the other, Vasya, who was just my own age, lived at home with his mother. Old Kapluntsev had kept 5 pair of horses and sent carriers all over the town. His widow had not given up the business but managed the carriers as well as her husband had done, so that some days they would bring in as much as 5 rubles from their rounds. The young fellow, too, made a trifle on his own account. He used to breed fancy pigeons and sell them to fanciers. At times he would stand for hours on the roof, waving a broom in the air and whistling. His pigeons were right up in the clouds, but it wasn't enough for him, and he'd want them to go higher yet. Siskins and starlings, too, he used to catch, and he made cages for sale. All trifles, but, mind you, he'd pick up some 10 rubles a month over such trifles. Well, as time went on, the old lady lost the use of her legs and took to her bed. In consequence of which event, the house was left without a woman to look after it, and that's for all the world like a man without an eye. The old lady bestirred herself and made up her mind to marry Vasya. They called in a matchmaker at once. The women got to talking of one thing and another, and Vasya went off to have a look at the girls. He picked out Mashenka, a widow's daughter. They made up their minds without loss of time, and in a week it was all settled. The girl was a little slip of a thing, 17, but fair-skinned and pretty-looking, and like a lady in all her ways, and a decent dowry with her, 500 rubles, a cow, a bed. Well, the old lady, it seemed as though she had known it was coming, 3 days after the wedding, departed to the heavenly Jerusalem, where is neither sickness nor sighing. The young people gave her a good funeral and began their life together. For just 6 months they got on splendidly, and then, all of a sudden, another misfortune. It never rains, but it pours. Vasya was summoned to the recruiting office to draw lots for the service. He was taken, poor chap, for a soldier, and not even granted exemption. They shaved his head and packed him off to Poland. It was God's will. There was nothing to be done. When he said goodbye to his wife in the yard, he bore it all right, but as he glanced up at the hayloft and his pigeons for the last time, he burst out crying. It was pitiful to see him. At first, Mashenka got her mother to stay with her, that she mightn't be dull all alone. She stayed till the baby, this very Kuska here, was born, and then she went off to Oboyan to another married daughter's, and left Mashenka alone with the baby. There were 5 peasants, the carriers, a drunken, saucy lot, horses too, and dray carts to see to, and then the fence would be broken, or the soot afire in the chimney. Jobs beyond a woman, and through our being neighbours, she got into the way of turning to me for every little thing. Well, I'd go over, set things to rights, and give advice. Naturally, not without going indoors, drinking a cup of tea and having a little chat with her. I was a young fellow, intellectual, and fond of talking on all sorts of subjects. She too was well bred and educated. She was always neatly dressed, and in summer she walked out with a sunshade. Sometimes I would begin upon religion or politics with her, and she was flattered and would entertain me with tea and jam. In a word, not to make a long story of it, I must tell you, old man, a year had not passed before the evil one, the enemy of all mankind, confounded me. I began to notice that any day I didn't go to see her, I seemed out of sorts and dull, and I'd be continually making up something that I must see her about. It's high time, I'd say to myself, to put the double windows in for the winter, and the whole day I'd idle away over at her place, putting in the windows, and take good care to leave a couple of them over for the next day too. I ought to count over Vasya's pigeons, to see none of them have strayed, and so on. I used always to be talking to her across the fence, and in the end I made a little gate in the fence, so as not to have to go so far round. From womankind comes much evil into the world, and every kind of abomination. Not we sinners only, even the saints themselves have been led astray by them. Mashenka did not try to keep me at a distance. Instead of thinking of her husband and being on her guard, she fell in love with me. I began to notice that she was dull without me, and was always walking to and fro by the fence, looking into my yard through the cracks. My brains were going round in my head in a sort of frenzy. On Thursday in Holy Week, I was going early in the morning. It was scarcely light to market. I passed close by her gate, and the evil one was by me, at my elbow. I looked. She had a gate with open trellis work at the top, and there she was, up already, standing in the middle of the yard, feeding the ducks. I could not restrain myself, and I called her name. She came up and looked at me through the trellis. Her little face was white, her eyes soft and sleepy-looking. I liked her looks immensely, and I began paying her compliments, as though we were not at the gate, but just as one does on name days, while she blushed and laughed and kept looking straight into my eyes without winking. I lost all sense and began to declare my love to her. She opened the gate, and from that morning we began to live as man and wife. The hunchback Alyoshka came into the yard from the street and ran out of breath into the house, not looking at anyone. A minute later, he ran out of the house with a concertina, jingling some coppers in his pocket and cracking sunflower seeds as he ran. He went out at the gate. "And who's that, pray?" asked Matveyevich. "My son Alexei," answered Dyudia. "He's off on a spree, the rascal. God has afflicted him with a hump, so we are not very hard on him." "And he's always drinking with the other fellows, always drinking," sighed Afanasyevna. "Before Carnival we married him, thinking he'd be steadier, but there, he's worse than ever." "It's been no use, simply keeping another man's daughter for nothing," said Dyudia. Somewhere behind the church, they began to sing a glorious, mournful song. The words they could not catch, and only the voices could be heard, 2 tenors and a bass. All were listening. There was complete stillness in the yard. 2 voices suddenly broke off with a loud roar of laughter, but the third, a tenor, still sang on, and took so high a note that everyone instinctively looked upwards, as though the voice had soared to heaven itself. Varvara came out of the house, and screening her eyes with her hand, as though from the sun, she looked towards the church. "It's the priest's sons with the schoolmaster," she said. Again all the 3 voices began to sing together. Matveyevich sighed and went on. "Well, that's how it was, old man. 2 years later we got a letter from Vasya from Warsaw. He wrote that he was being sent home sick. He was ill. By that time, I had put all that foolishness out of my head, and I had a fine match picked out all ready for me, only I didn't know how to break it off with my sweetheart. Every day I'd make up my mind to have it out with Mashenka, but I didn't know how to approach her, so as not to have a woman screeching about my ears. The letter freed my hands. I read it through with Mashenka. She turned white as a sheet, while I said to her, 'Thank God, now,' says I, 'you'll be a married woman again.' But says she, 'I'm not going to live with him.' 'Why, isn't he your husband?' said I. 'Is it an easy thing? I never loved him, and I married him not of my own free will. My mother made me.' 'Don't try to get out of it, silly,' said I, 'but tell me this, were you married to him in church or not?' 'I was married,' she said, 'but it's you that I love, and I will stay with you to the day of my death. Folks may jeer. I don't care.' 'You're a Christian woman,' said I, 'and have read the scriptures. What is written there?' 'Once married, with her husband she must live,' said Dyudia. 'Man and wife are one flesh. We have sinned,' I said, 'you and I, and it is enough. We must repent and fear God. We must confess it all to Vasya,' said I. 'He's a quiet fellow and soft. He won't kill you. And indeed,' said I, 'better to suffer torments in this world at the hands of your lawful master than to gnash your teeth at the dread seat of judgment.' The wench wouldn't listen. She stuck to her silly, 'It's you I love,' and nothing more could I get out of her. Vasya came back on the Saturday before Trinity, early in the morning. From my fence I could see everything. He ran into the house and came back a minute later with Kuzka in his arms, and he was laughing and crying all at once. He was kissing Kuzka and looking up at the hayloft, and hadn't the heart to put the child down, and yet he was longing to go to his pigeons. He was always a soft sort of chap, sentimental. That day passed off very well, all quiet and proper. They had begun ringing the church bells for the evening service, when the thought struck me. Tomorrow's Trinity Sunday. How is it they are not decking the gates and the fence with green? Something's wrong, I thought. I went over to them. I peeped in, and there he was, sitting on the floor in the middle of the room, his eyes staring like a drunken man's, the tears streaming down his cheeks and his hands shaking. He was pulling cracknels, necklaces, gingerbread nuts, and all sorts of little presents out of his bundle and flinging them on the floor. Kuzka, he was 3 years old, was crawling on the floor, munching the gingerbreads, while Mashenka stood by the stove, white and shivering all over, muttering, "I'm not your wife, I can't live with you," and all sorts of foolishness. I bowed down at Vasya's feet and said, "We have sinned against you, Vasily Maximych. Forgive us, for Christ's sake." Then I got up and spoke to Mashenka. "You, Maria Semyonovna, ought now to wash Vasily Maximich's feet and drink the water. Do you be an obedient wife to him, and pray to God for me, that he in his mercy may forgive my transgression." It came to me like an inspiration from an angel of heaven. I gave her solemn counsel, and spoke with such feeling that my own tears flowed too. And so 2 days later, Vasya comes to me. "Matyusha," says he, "I forgive you and my wife. God have mercy on you. She was a soldier's wife, a young thing all alone. It was hard for her to be on her guard. She's not the first, nor will she be the last. Only," he says, "I beg you to behave as though there had never been anything between you, and to make no sign, while I," says he, "will do my best to please her in every way, so that she may come to love me again." He gave me his hand on it, drank a cup of tea, and went away more cheerful. Well, thought I, thank God, and I did feel glad that everything had gone off so well. But no sooner had Vasya gone out of the yard, when in came Mashenka. Ah, what I had to suffer! She hung on my neck, weeping and praying, "For God's sake, don't cast me off. I can't live without you." "The vile hussy," sighed Dayudya. I swore at her, stamped my foot, and dragging her into the passage, I fastened the door with the hook. "Go to your husband," I cried. "Don't shame me before folks. Fear God." And every day there was a scene of that sort. One morning I was standing in my yard near the stable cleaning a bridle. All at once I saw her running through the little gate into my yard, with bare feet, in her petticoat, and straight towards me. She clutched at the bridle, getting all smeared with the pitch, and shaking and weeping, she cried, "I can't stand him. I loathe him. I can't bear it. If you don't love me, better kill me." I was angry, and I struck her twice with the bridle, but at that instant Vasya ran in at the gate, and in a despairing voice he shouted, "Don't beat her, don't beat her." But he ran up himself, and waving his arms as though he were mad, he let fly with his fists at her with all his might, then flung her on the ground and kicked her. I tried to defend her, but he snatched up the reins and thrashed her with them, and all the while, like a colt's whinny, he went, he! Said, "I'd take the reins and let you feel them," muttered Varvara, moving away. "Murdering our sister, the damned brutes." "Hold your tongue, you jade," Dudia shouted at her. He! Matvey Savitch went on. "A carrier ran out of his yard. I called to my workman, and the three of us got Mashenka away from him and carried her home in our arms. The disgrace of it. The same day I went over in the evening to see how things were. She was lying in bed, all wrapped up in bandages, nothing but her eyes and nose to be seen. She was looking at the ceiling. I said, 'Good evening, Maria Semyonovna.' She did not speak, and Vasya was sitting in the next room, his head in his hands, crying and saying, 'Brute that I am, I've ruined my life. Oh God, let me die.' I sat for half an hour by Mashenka and gave her a good talking to. I tried to frighten her a bit. 'The righteous,' said I, 'after this life go to paradise, but you will go to a Gehenna of fire, like all adulteresses. Don't strive against your husband. Go and lay yourself at his feet.' But never a word from her. She didn't so much as blink an eyelid, for all the world as though I were talking to a post. The next day Vasya fell ill with something like cholera, and in the evening I heard that he was dead. Well, so they buried him, and Mashenka did not go to the funeral. She didn't care to show her shameless face and her bruises. And soon there began to be talk all over the district that Vasya had not died a natural death, that Mashenka had made away with him. It got to the ears of the police. They had Vasya dug up and cut open, and in his stomach they found arsenic. It was clear he had been poisoned. The police came and took Mashenka away, and with her the innocent Kuzka. They were put in prison. The woman had gone too far. God punished her. 8 months later, they tried her. She sat, I remember, on a low stool with a little white kerchief on her head, wearing a grey gown, and she was so thin, so pale, so sharp-eyed, it made one sad to look at her. Behind her stood a soldier with a gun. She would not confess her guilt. Some in the court said she had poisoned her husband, and others declared he had poisoned himself for grief. I was one of the witnesses. When they questioned me, I told the whole truth according to my oath. Hers, said I, is the guilt. It's no good to conceal it. She did not love her husband, and she had a will of her own. The trial began in the morning, and towards night they passed this sentence: to send her to hard labor in Siberia for 13 years. After that sentence, Mashenka remained 3 months longer in prison. I went to see her, and from Christian charity I took her a little tea and sugar. But as soon as she set eyes on me, she began to shake all over, wringing her hands and muttering, "Go away, go away!" And Kuzka she clasped to her as though she were afraid I would take him away. "See," said I, "what you have come to. Ah, Masha, Masha, you would not listen to me when I gave you good advice, and now you must repent it. You are yourself to blame," said I. "Blame yourself." I was giving her good counsel, but she, "Go away, go away," huddling herself and Kuzka against the wall and trembling all over. When they were taking her away to the chief town of our province, I walked by the escort as far as the station and slipped a ruble into her bundle for my soul's salvation. But she did not get as far as Siberia. She fell sick of fever and died in prison. "Live like a dog, and you must die a dog's death," said Dyudya. Kuzka was sent back home. I thought it over and took him to bring up. After all, though a convict's child, still he was a living soul, a Christian. I was sorry for him. I shall make him my clerk, and if I have no children of my own, I'll make a merchant of him. Wherever I go now, I take him with me, let him learn his work. All the while Matvey Savitch had been telling his story, Kuzka had sat on a little stone near the gate. His head propped in both hands, he gazed at the sky, and in the distance he looked in the dark like a stump of wood. "Kuzka, come to bed," Matvey Savitch bawled to him. "Yes, it's time," said Dyudya, getting up. He yawned loudly and added, "Folks will go their own way, and that's what comes of it." Over the yard, the moon was floating now in the heavens. She was moving one way, while the clouds beneath moved the other way. The clouds were disappearing into the darkness, but still the moon could be seen high above the yard. Matvey Savitch said a prayer, facing the church, and saying good night, he lay down on the ground near his cart. Kuzka, too, said a prayer, lay down in the cart, and covered himself with his little overcoat. He made himself a little hole in the hay, so as to be more comfortable, and curled up so that his elbows looked like knees. From the yard, Dyudya could be seen lighting a candle in his room below, putting on his spectacles, and standing in the corner with a book. He was a long while reading and crossing himself. The travellers fell asleep. Afanasyevna and Sofya came up to the cart and began looking at Kuzka. "The little orphan's asleep," said the old woman. "He's thin and frail, nothing but bones. No mother and no one to care for him properly." "My Grishutka must be 2 years older," said Sofya. "Up at the factory he lives like a slave without his mother. The foreman beats him, I dare say. When I looked at this poor mite just now, I thought of my own Grishutka, and my heart went cold within me." A minute passed in silence. "Doesn't remember his mother, I suppose," said the old woman. "How could he remember?" and big tears began dropping from Sofya's eyes. "He's curled himself up like a cat," she said, sobbing and laughing with tenderness and sorrow. "Poor motherless mite." Kuzka started and opened his eyes. He saw before him an ugly, wrinkled, tear-stained face, and beside it another, aged and toothless, with a sharp chin and hooked nose, and high above them, the infinite sky with the flying clouds and the moon. He cried out in fright, and Sofya too uttered a cry. Both were answered by the echo, and a faint stir passed over the stifling air. A watchman tapped somewhere near, a dog barked. Matvey Savich muttered something in his sleep and turned over on the other side. Late at night, when Diudia and the old woman and the neighbouring watchmen were all asleep, Sofya went out to the gate and sat down on the bench. She felt stifled and her head ached from weeping. The street was a wide and long one. It stretched for nearly 2 miles to the right and as far to the left, and the end of it was out of sight. The moon was now not over the yard but behind the church. One side of the street was flooded with moonlight, while the other side lay in black shadow. The long shadows of the poplars and the starling coats stretched right across the street, while the church cast a broad shadow, black and terrible, that enfolded Diudia's gates and half his house. The street was still and deserted. From time to time, the strains of music floated faintly from the end of the street. Alyoshka, most likely, playing his concertina. Someone moved in the shadow near the church enclosure, and Sofya could not make out whether it were a man or a cow, or perhaps merely a big bird rustling in the trees. But then a figure stepped out of the shadow, halted, and said something in a man's voice, then vanished down the turning by the church. A little later, not 3 yards from the gate, another figure came into sight. It walked straight from the church to the gate and stopped short, seeing Sofya on the bench. "Varvara, is that you?" said Sofya. And if it were... It was Varvara. She stood still a minute, then came up to the bench and sat down. "Where have you been?" asked Sofya. Varvara made no answer. "You'd better mind you don't get into trouble with such goings-on, my girl," said Sofya. "Did you hear how Mashenka was kicked and lashed with the reins? You'd better look out, or they'll treat you the same." "Well, let them." Varvara laughed into her kerchief and whispered, "I have just been with the priest's son." "Nonsense." "I have." "It's a sin," whispered Sofya. "Well, let it be. What do I care? If it's a sin, then it is a sin, but better be struck dead by thunder than live like this. I'm young and strong, and I've a filthy, crooked hunchback for a husband, worse than Diudia himself, curse him. When I was a girl, I hadn't bread to eat or a shoe to my foot, and to get away from that wretchedness, I was tempted by Alyoshka's money and got caught like a fish in a net, and I'd rather have a viper for my bedfellow than that scurvy Alyoshka. And what's your life? It makes me sick to look at it. Your Fyodor sent you packing from the factory, and he's taken up with another woman. They have robbed you of your boy and made a slave of him. You work like a horse and never hear a kind word. I'd rather pine all my days an old maid. I'd rather get half a ruble from the priest's son. I'd rather beg my bread or throw myself into the well." "It's a sin," whispered Sofya again. "Well, let it be." Somewhere behind the church, the same 3 voices, 2 tenors and a bass, began singing again a mournful song. And again, the words could not be distinguished. "They are not early to bed," Varvara said, laughing, and she began telling in a whisper of her midnight walks with the priest's son, and of the stories he had told her, and of his comrades, and of the fun she had with the travellers who stayed in the house. The mournful song stirred a longing for life and freedom. Sofya began to laugh. She thought it sinful and terrible and sweet to hear about, and she felt envious and sorry that she, too, had not been a sinner when she was young and pretty. In the churchyard, they heard 12 strokes beaten on the watchman's board. "It's time we were asleep," said Sofya, getting up. "Or, maybe, we shall catch it from Diudia." They both went softly into the yard. "I went away without hearing what he was telling about Mashenka," said Varvara, making herself a bed under the window. "She died in prison," he said. She poisoned her husband. Varvara lay down beside Sofia a while and said softly, I'd make away with my Alyoshka and never regret it. You talk nonsense, God forgive you. When Sofia was just dropping asleep, Varvara, coming close, whispered in her ear, Let us get rid of Dayudia and Alyoshka. Sofia started and said nothing. Then she opened her eyes and gazed a long while steadily at the sky. People would find out, she said. No, they wouldn't. Dayudia's an old man. It's time he did die. And they'd say, Alyoshka died of drink. I'm afraid. God would chastise us. Well, let him. Both lay awake, thinking in silence. It's cold, said Sofia, beginning to shiver all over. It will soon be morning. Are you asleep? No. Don't you mind what I say, dear, whispered Varvara. I get so mad with the damn brutes, I don't know what I do say. Go to sleep, or it will be daylight directly. Go to sleep. Both were quiet, and soon they fell asleep. Earlier than all woke the old woman. She waked up Sofia, and they went together into the cowshed to milk the cows. The hunchback Alyoshka came in hopelessly drunk without his concertina. His breast and knees had been in the dust and straw. He must have fallen down in the road. Staggering, he went into the cowshed, and without undressing, he rolled into a sledge and began to snore at once. When first the crosses on the church, and then the windows were flashing in the light of the rising sun, and shadows stretched across the yard over the dewy grass, from the trees, and the top of the well. Matvey Savich jumped up and began hurrying about. Kuzka, get up, he shouted. It's time to put in the horses. Look sharp. The bustle of morning was beginning. A young Jewess in a brown gown with flounces led a horse into the yard to drink. The pulley of the well creaked plaintively. The bucket knocked as it went down. Kuzka, sleepy, tired, covered with dew, sat up in the cart, lazily putting on his little overcoat and listening to the drip of the water from the bucket into the well as he shivered with the cold. Auntie, shouted Matvey Savich to Sofia, tell my lad to hurry up and to harness the horses. And Dayudia at the same instant shouted from the window, Sofia, take a farthing from the Jewess for the horses' drink. They're always in here, the mangy creatures. In the street, sheep were running up and down, baaing. The peasant women were shouting at the shepherd, while he played his pipes, cracked his whip, or answered them in a thick, sleepy bass. 3 sheep strayed into the yard, and not finding the gate again, pushed at the fence. Varvara was waked by the noise, and bundling her bedding up in her arms, she went into the house. You might at least drive the sheep out, the old woman bawled after her. My lady. I dare say, as if I were going to slave for you Herods, muttered Varvara, going into the house. Dayudia came out of the house with his accounts in his hands, sat down on the step, and began reckoning how much the traveller owed him for the night's lodging, oats, and watering his horses. You charge pretty heavily for the oats, my good man, said Matvey Savich. If it's too much, don't take them. There's no compulsion, merchant. When the travellers were ready to start, they were detained for a minute. Kuzka had lost his cap. Little swine, where did you put it? Matvey Savich roared angrily. Where is it? Kuzka's face was working with terror. He ran up and down near the cart, and not finding it there, ran to the gate and then to the shed. The old woman and Sofia helped him look. I'll pull your ears off, yelled Matvey Savich. Dirty brat. The cap was found at the bottom of the cart. Kuzka brushed the hay off it with his sleeve, put it on, and timidly he crawled into the cart, still with an expression of terror on his face, as though he were afraid of a blow from behind. Matvey Savich crossed himself. The driver gave a tug at the reins, and the cart rolled out of the yard. The end. Reader's notes. Reading Peasant Wives, you might wonder whether Chekhov was just another sexist guy from the 1880s, writing through characters like the judgmental Matvey Savich. But look closer at how he tells the story. Sure, we start with Matvey's self-righteous tale about that sinful woman Mashenka. But then Chekhov does something interesting. He shifts the lens entirely, showing us the world through the women's eyes. We see Varvara's fierce rebellion against her trapped life, Sofya's quiet suffering, and even understand why Mashenka did what she did. These aren't the flat, wicked women characters a sexist writer would create. They're complex, smart, and very human. If Chekhov wanted to preach about women's proper place, he could have stopped after Matvey's moralistic story. Instead, he takes us deeper, letting us eavesdrop on that late-night conversation between Varvara and Sofya. We hear their dreams, their pain, their desperate plans. Through their voices, we see the brutal reality behind all those smug male judgments about female virtue. This was pretty radical stuff for 1880s Russia. By giving these peasant women real voices and understandable reasons for their actions, Chekhov wasn't supporting the system. He was quietly exposing its cruelty. He shows us women forced into awful marriages, trapped by poverty, beaten by husbands, and then condemned by society for trying to find some happiness. So no, this doesn't read like a story written by someone who thought women were inferior. Instead, it feels like the work of a writer using his craft to make readers question everything they assumed about women, morality, and justice. And that's what makes it still worth reading today. Thank you for listening to this short story. If you like content like this, I'd ask that you do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. It also really helps the algorithm if you like, hit the notification bell, and especially if you leave a comment. Thank you and have a blessed day.